We are all vampires. People kinda suck, not because they're evil, but because they are unintegrated. At times, what we call cruelty is just dysregulation in disguise. We crave connection but flinch from vulnerability. We seek meaning but sabotage it with distraction. We want intimacy but armor ourselves with performance. Failure isn't in humanity itself, it's in our refusal to metabolize pain into wisdom. When people suck, it's often because they're stuck. Looping in unresolved trauma, unexamined beliefs, and inherited shame. They ghost, they lash out, they manipulate, they withdraw, not because they want harm, but because they don't know how to stay present with discomfort. Their nervous systems are in threat mode, and their behaviors follow suit. But this isn't just about them. It's about all of us. We are all vampires, feeding on emotional states to regulate our own. Some of us chase joy in others so we can feel it ourselves. Some provoke fear or sadness to feel powerful. Some drain attention, some hoard validation, some manipulate proximity. These appetites aren't metaphorical. They shape behavior, relationships, and institutions. They show up in families, friendships, therapy rooms, and boardrooms. They show up in the way someone interrupts your grief to center their own. In the way someone flirts just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to commit. In the way someone weaponizes silence to make you beg for repair. In a world that rewards extraction over reciprocity, vampirism becomes a survival strategy. But it's also a warning. Without conscious regulation, we become predators of the very emotions we seek to understand. We drain others to fill our own voids. We confuse intensity with intimacy. We mistake reaction for connection. This book doesn't pretend to fix that, but it does offer a mirror. It shows you where you feed, what you chase, and how to build a nervous system that can hold feeling without extraction. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming coherent. It's about learning to metabolize emotion instead of outsourcing it. It's about building symbolic fluency, emotional granularity, and behavioral precision so you can stay in the room when things get complicated. And here's the part that matters most. Not all people are you. You may be doing the work, asking questions, regulating, repairing, but others may not be. They may be hurting in ways you can't see. They may take their pain out on you. They may ridicule, reject, or lash out not because you deserve it, but because they don't know how else to survive. That doesn't make it okay. But it does make it understandable. Understanding someone's pain doesn't mean you have to absorb it. It means you don't have to fight it or hate it. Mercy is not weakness. Love is not submission. They are protective forces, ways of staying intact when others fragment. If someone cannot receive your mercy, if they cannot return your love, let them go. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because fighting someone who is drowning will only pull you under. And hatting someone who is hurting will only poison your own well-being. This is the paradox. The more you understand others, the less you need to defend yourself against them. Their pain is not your fault. Their behavior is not your burden. Your job is to stay regulated, stay symbolic, and stay human, even when others forget how. Mercy is the answer. Love is the architecture. And if they can't meet you there, you walk away not to punish, but to protect what you've built. Morality. Morality isn't just a set of rules. It's a way of organizing emotional energy. It's how a nervous system decides what to protect, what to release, and what to repair. Most moral failure isn't ideological, it's regulatory. People don't betray each other because they lack values. They betray each other because their systems collapse under pressure and they reach for control instead of coherence. Society teaches morality as performance. Say the right thing, signal the right stance, punish the right enemy. But real morality is quieter. It's the moment you choose not to retaliate. It's the breath you take before speaking. It's the decision to stay present with someone's pain without needing to fix it or flee from it. These are not grand gestures. They are micro-regulations that shape the moral architecture of a life. Morality is not imposed. It's practiced and absolute in self-development because without it your place in society is bound to crumble. It's built through symbolic acts. The way you hold eye contact, the way you name your own fear, the way you refuse to feed on someone else's distress just to soothe your own. These acts don't just express values, they encode them. They become part of your behavioral memory, accessible even when you're flooded, exhausted, or afraid. But here, the tension. Society is not built for coherence. It's built for speed, spectacle, and extraction. It rewards those who perform safely while outsourcing harm. It teaches us to win arguments, not to metabolize contradiction. In this climate, morality becomes a liability, something to hide behind or weaponize, not something to live. That is why symbolic fluency matters. It gives you a way to hold your values in motion. It lets you respond to complexity without collapsing into defense. It helps you stay human when the social field demands performance. And it protects you from becoming the very thing you're trying to survive. This is not about being good. It's about being intact. It's about building a nervous system that can hold pain without passing it on. A system that can feel anger without turning it into punishment. A system that can feel love without demanding reciprocation. That's morality, not as doctrine, but as design. What makes a person who has everything disregard their psychophysiological needs? Why does a drug addict become a sex worker to get high on the thing that makes them miserable? How does a man who thinks he can do anything abandon the very things that bring them joy? What are these behaviors paired with? Who paired pain with pleasure for you? Consider a victim of sexual assault who experienced stimulation during a pressured, intense, violent experience. A forced, embedded bioinduced cognitive dissonance. Hate that there was a remnants of pleasure in one of the most traumatic human experiences. Unknowingly, a drug dealer might pair the dopamine release from the drug to his presence in the mind of the drug addict. In terms of classical condition, the junkie begins to drool at thought of the dealer. Life can be a horrible place, so though I'm telling you to make it a beautiful one for yourself, don't discredit the fact that monsters do exist. Consider your worst thought and then consider, for some people out there, that it is the beginning of their best thoughts. Some do it without noticing that your destruction is their pleasure, but maybe they were paired that way. People can be awful, and sometimes it can be ill-earned lashes. Sometimes, you're right, the world was wrong. But don't ever think they would be okay with being wrong. An escalation tactic that will cause you worst enemy to kill your child. You cannot change the world, but you can change yourself. You can even choose to forgive and love, but if you think for one moment you have the power to change a person. You're playing in fire, and don't be surprised when you look around and it all turns to hell. I can't promise the world is going to be nice to you, but you have the power to be nice to yourself. And the fact of the matter is that you don't need anyone else for that. Although this is based on the social context, the day you get your full validation from others and not from your ability to do things for you, then you will just be swept away by the breath of any smooth talker, a position many girls find themselves in prior to a sexual assault. Self-worth begins with you, not others, but too much self-worth will drive people away. Where is balance? If you love the right people and love them hard, they will remind you that you need to love yourself too. Sometimes giving too much love away, although it feels like the right thing, will be the very thing that destroys you. It's better to spend 10 years waiting to have one good friend as opposed to 10 friendships that won't survive a winter. Do you love you? Sometimes we get confused like the drug addict or the rape victim. True self-love brings dopamine release with no catch-22s. Every superhero has their origin story, and most superhero stories will never be told, but those are the most honorable. It's the qualitative measurement that your change is not for their validation, but your own. The inevitability of the end. Leonardo da Vinci's final years were not defined by stillness. Aging and physically weakened, he relocated to France in 1516 under the patronage of King Francis. He was granted residence at the Château du Clos Lucé, near the royal court at Amboise, and appointed premier painter, engineer, and architect to the king. Though honored, Leonardo was no longer the man who dissected bodies or engineered flying machines. He had suffered a stroke, likely in 1517, which left his dominant hand partially paralyzed. His physical limitations marked a turning point, not just in his output, but in his orientation. His notebooks from this period reflect a profound shift. There were fewer inventions, fewer anatomical studies, the death of his creativity. In their place, reflections on nature's cycles, the erosion of mountains, the flow of water, the inevitability of decay. The anatomical gave way to the elemental. The body became dust. The machine became metaphor. What once was a pursuit of mastery becoming a meditation on meaning. Leonardo's many unfinished works, paintings left incomplete, machines never built, treatises never published, began to accumulate. What he once considered the answers were now left with question. They formed a symbolic archive of unresolved inquiry, emotional residue, and cognitive persistence. These were not failures in the conventional sense. They were the scaffolding of a deeper psychological state, neuroticism not as dysfunction, but as depth. Psychologically, this reflects a transition from external mastery to internal meaning-making, a shift from performance to presence. His sensitivity to impermanence became a form of existential attunement. Fatting light, incomplete sketches, metaphors of breath and dust, these were not signs of decline, but symbols of emotional clarity. He was no longer trying to conquer time. He was listening to it. This is the paradox of late-stage cognition. The more we accept impermanence, the more we can build structures that endure. The ability to feel the world slipping and still find rhythm in the fall. Leonardo's final years were also marked by legacy planning. He brought with him to France several of his most important works, including the Mona Lisa, which he continued to refine. He began organizing his manuscripts, preparing them for his trusted pupil Francesco Melzi, who would become the primary custodian of his intellectual estate. Leonardo died on May 2, 1519, at the age of 67, and was buried in the chapel of St. Hubert at Amboise. Intuitive integration. Selecting activities must pass through cultural and emotional filters. A walk can signify freedom or grief, a ritual safety or shame, and the same gesture can soothe one's nervous system while triggering another. This variability is a feature of symbolic cognition, not a flaw. Symbolic congruence, the alignment of action with a participant's symbolic landscape, transforms coping into ritual by engaging semantic memory, emotional tagging, and associative networks, so the brain records what the act means as well as what it does. But resonance alone is not enough. Rituals must also be ecologically viable, matched to time, place, and relational context. So a breath practice that requires silence or a journaling ritual that needs solitude can actually be sustained. When symbolic congruence, emotional resonance, and ecological relevance converge, activity selection becomes an embodied recognition rather than a contested choice. The participant does not so much decide as perceived that a practice belongs. That perception is experienced as a somatic flash. Breath steadies, attention narrows, the chest or gut relaxes, and doubt recedes into a quick forward pull toward one action. An immediate felt certitude that compiles past experience, cultural meaning, and present affordances into a single low-friction invitation. This intuitive selection matters because it signals system-wide alignment. Memory, affect, and context have registered the same conclusion, increasing the likelihood the ritual will be enacted, sustained, and absorbed into identity. It is not mystical. It is the nervous system's integrative shortcut when multimodal evidence coheres. Semantic tags, interoceptive clarity, and situational viability converge into recognition. To cultivate this capacity, use bodily cues of ease as reliable decision data. With recursive testing and feedback, the deliberate act of selection graduates into spontaneous recognition. The ritual that arrives in both mind and body, ready to regulate, to belong, and to be returned to without coercion. Deliberately opposing an intuitive pull can be a disciplined strategy. When intuition is biased by habit, trauma, or cultural blind spots, pausing and choosing otherwise creates space for testing assumptions, exposing unseen consequences, and preventing automatic reproduction of maladaptive rituals. In design practice, this restraint fosters epistemic humility, documents failure modes, and compels explicit hypothesis testing. For someone cultivating a Renaissance brain, it trains methodological rigor, strengthening sequencing, comparison, and error tracking, so imaginative breadth is translated into accountable, implementable work rather than endless possibility. Repeatedly overriding embodied recognition, however, carries costs. Habitual suppression of felt signals risks disembedding the nervous system from its attunement cues, producing decision fatigue, blunted interoception, or a slide toward abstract procedure that no longer fits lived contexts. Practically, this can turn benevolent curiosity into performative tinkering. Projects multiply without the felt coherence that provokes sustained enactment. For a practitioner aiming to unite visionary synthesis with practical consequence, chronic override can atrophy the capacity for rapid integrated recognition, rendering creative impulses inefficient and ethically hollow when they cannot be embodied or lived into the world. Designing a Renaissance mind, therefore, demands balance rather than allegiance to one pole. Intuition furnishes the compass of generative insight, the quick, low-friction recognition that signals cultural, autobiographical, and visceral fit, while contrarian interrogation supplies the map, verification, closure, and accountable translation into practice. A resilient architecture alternates attunement and interrogation. Biologically, these modes recruit distinct but interacting networks. Intuitive selection depends on rapid integration across interoceptive hubs, such as the insula default mode systems that hold autobiographical and cultural narratives, mirror and simulation circuits that replay social outcomes, and subcortical reward pathways that reinforce low-friction choices. Deliberative override recruits lateral prefrontal control systems, dorsal anterior cingulate conflict monitoring, and hippocampal episodic comparison. Repeated enactment and repeated override produce complementary plasticity. The former strengthens associative, pattern recognition pathways. The latter reinforces executive control loops. Yet chronic conflict between gut feeling and imposed action elevates allostatic load through sustained sympathetic and HPA activation, degrading sleep, immunity, and cognitive flexibility. By contrast, mindful, limited override from a regulated baseline preserves vagal tone and supports integrative plasticity. To optimize both biological health and creative efficacy, periodize practice. Alternate blocks of intuitive enactment with blocks of structured testing, so associative and control networks co-develop. Making symbolic meanings explicit strengthens associative bindings and treat bodily cues of ease, breath rhythm, a sense of expansion or settling, reduced anticipatory tension, as decision data rather than background noise. Intuitive activity selection requires a quieter intelligence that chooses what matters, not by strict rules or formulas, but by attention, feeling, and purpose. Instead of forcing experience into neat scientific boxes, it asks us to practice active selection, notice, hold, and then gently favor what nourishes growth, truth, and connection. In that way, knowledge becomes a lived sense, a way of moving through complexity with moral taste and practical care. The result is a humble, poetic method. Cultivate clarity through attentive choices, let theory follow lived sense, and shape action by what resonates most deeply with human need. Intuition in the real world can stem from roots we've always been akin to. Consider that if you are musically inclined, you might lean toward coping mechanisms that engage your auditory receptiveness. The perfect activities for you might be things you already do, though they may require strategic replacement of usage. Still, exploration into what is not intuitive is a basis for developing the Renaissance brain. The suggested outcome travels past self-help and into sustained self-development. Intuition is a quiet, practiced knowing that stitches together memory, feeling, and attention into a directional nudge, less a proof than a summons to try. When we slow down and listen, it points toward what truly matters, offering simple experiments rather than final answers. Treated with curiosity and ethical care, it becomes a reliable companion for navigating ambiguity, converting repeated small tests into the steady wisdom that guides choice and action. Your intuition is your intelligence speaking to you before you can articulate it behaviorally and linguistically.